I'm just going to click on this title composition, and I'm going to turn off the graph editor for now and scroll over to here. And I'm going to loop this intro so I don't have to keep moving the playhead around. So I'm just going to loop this first second and a half over here so I can focus on that area. And so since my text is kind of swiping in from the left, I can add some different effects to go along with that. So I'm going to like go kind of here where it's at, maybe it's like fastest point, and zoom in a little bit. And so I'll close this character section. And so in this right-hand area, we haven't used this a whole lot yet, but there's a bunch of different stuff under here that is useful. So today we'll look at the effects and presets. And if you click on here, you can see all these different effects that we can drop into our animation. And there's a search here. So like if I want to do like a blur effect, I can type in blur and it'll show me all of these different blurs that I can add. But I can also just look through here. So there's a whole section called blur and sharpen. And so we can look at these different blurs and we can animate a blur effect that goes along with our animation, our position animation. So let's see. There's a bunch of different types of blurs. Let's try I don't see motion blur on here. Let's see if there's a motion blur. Pixel motion blur. Let's see how that looks. I'll throw that on here. So notice what happens. So I'm going to undo that. So when I throw the motion blur onto this channel or this layer, it opens up this blur window, and for whatever reason, it docks it up here in the top left. And so we can actually see the effect here, and we can see all the properties here, but it also opens this other window, so you can play with the properties there as well. I'm not really sure why it does that, but you know, that's what'll happen. So so let's see if we can get a good blur. So let's see. Oh, this is like pixelating it. Huh. I'm not sure this is exactly what I want. Let's see. Yeah, this might not be the right effect. Okay, let's delete this one. So I'm just going to click on this effect and just hit the delete key. Let's try another blur. So let's go back to blur and sharpen. And let's see. Let's just do a Gaussian blur, I think will be good. Okay, so that's kind of blurring the text, and it's making the black background fuzzy. Let's actually get rid of the black background for now. It's not really adding a lot, so I'm just going to go in here and just turn off the black background. So I'm just clicking the I button inside of my title composition. So let's go back to our main composition. Okay. So with the Gaussian blur, we can get just kind of general blurriness. And let's switch it to horizontal, so it's kind of blurring right to left. And so that looks okay. Let's set that to 25, and now I can actually clock this. So I'm going to click a keyframe there. And so then if I go back to the beginning and set my blurriness to 0 to start, and then go back up here and set my blurriness to 0 again. So now we'll get the blurriness going along with our animation. So it's kind of subtle. We could make the animation a bit longer to see more of that. So let's open up our transform. And so now we can see our keyframes for the blur. And let's see our keyframes for the X position are down here. So let's move those a little bit over so we can see that a bit better. Let's move this up to like 3 seconds. So I can grab these keyframes and move them up. And then I kind of want to match this to where it's going the fastest. So let's increase our thing here. Okay, so it's a subtle effect, but you can kind of see it's blurring. We could maybe go to this keyframe and see, there we go. We can make it as blurry as, I guess the top value is 50. Okay, let's zoom out a bit and see how that looks. Okay, I'm gonna pull this back just a bit. So we can get kind of a similar arc to the blur that we have with our motion. Okay, so that's one simple effect. Let's add another effect once we actually get into the screen. So I'm going to zoom out on my timeline just a bit and increase my loop a bit here. And let's look for another effect to add once we're actually in the screen. So let's do, let's see. Let's do a glow effect. So I'm just going to drop this onto the layer, and we're going to see the glow effect up here. And so let's see. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, you can see what the glow effect looks like here. And that's with intensity at 1. So if we turn the intensity down, that's 0.1. So we can just do like a little glow thing here. So let's keyframe the intensity at 0 and then move forward a little bit and move the intensity to 1. And then move forward a little bit and set it back to 0. So let's see how that looks. Let's zoom out a little bit. Okay, so we get that little glow at the end there. I want to edit my title text a little bit. Let's just get rid of the stroke because it's kind of looking weird. So I'll go to character. And for now, let's just see what it looks like without any stroke. I think this might look better. Okay. So that looks kind of cool. I could definitely make it look nicer, but I think that's good enough for this example. You can see, we can add as many effects as we want, and it's not really slowing down at all, but if we started to add like a ton of stuff, it would take a little bit longer to render. But you can get a sense of how you could add some different types of effects. And if you go and look in effects and presets, you can see there's a ton of different stuff in here. A lot of it could be, useful. Noise and grain, if you wanted to add, some texture. Let's see if we add in like a grain to our solid. Let's see. Okay, so we have to. I don't know why it's only applying to this little area. Can I make this bigger? Viewing mode, final output. Okay, so now we can see the whole thing. And so if we zoom in, you can see, let's set the size back to 1. So you get a little detail in the background just by adding some grain on there. So there's a bunch of other different noise and grain stuff you can add to add a little bit of detail. So it's not just a solid color. Let's see. There's a bunch of other effects in here. Color correction effects could be useful to like add some cool color changes. You could animate some different color changes. Distort could be fun. There's a bunch of stuff in there you could play with. Yeah, there's a whole ton of this stuff. I would just, play around, take a look through these and see if anything sounds interesting and just throw it on there and see how it looks. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about is the anchor point, which you guys have probably noticed at this point, but I just want to go over it now that we, have seen a little bit of some of the basic stuff. I'll pause for a second. Any questions on the effects? Yeah.
I can't really see the keyframe.
For the effects?
Yeah.
You probably have to open up on the layer. So click on the arrow in the layers. So it doesn't show you the keyframe up there.
Oh, okay.
But if you look,
Gotcha.
yeah. Yeah, no worries. And so those circles, you show you where the keyframes are, but you can't move those. So if you open up the effects with the arrow, you can, and you just gotta keep going until you see the diamonds, and then you can move the diamonds. Okay. Yeah, so you can just hit delete. Okay, so the anchor point is something that can be kind of tricky. So I'm going to make a new composition for that, just for an example. So I'm going to create a new composition and say anchor point. And I'll put this in here. And so for my anchor point, I'm going to change the background of this so we can see it a bit better. So I'll do something like that. Okay, so let's say in my anchor point I have a shape layer. And so you can see there's this little target in the middle, which is the middle of that shape layer. And there is a tool, where is it? I think I have to create a shape first. So let's create a shape. I'm going to make something that has a bit of dimensionality. So I'll make an ellipse, and I'll make it wider than it is tall. And let's zoom in a little bit there. And so I'm going to change the color. Let's just make it purple. And so you can see this anchor in the middle. When I drag, the whole kind of ellipse moves. And an easy way to demonstrate how this works is if I do some rotation animation. So if I hit R, and let's keyframe 0, and then go to 2 seconds, and then I'll just rotate around a bunch. Okay, there. So I'll just do one rotation. So notice that the ellipse is rotating around where this anchor point is. Okay, so if I move that anchor point, so I can use this tool, although it's not letting me. Let's see. What do I have to select to get the anchor point tool? I'm not locked on anything. Oh, I guess I just have to get closer to the anchor point. Okay, so if I move the anchor point all the way down, now you can see the ellipse is rotating around that anchor point down there. If I move it all the way up, it's rotating around up there. If I move it over here, it's going to rotate around that point. So if you're trying to get a specific type of animation, where it's rotating around a point, you may need to change the anchor point. And so if I want this to be in the middle, then I can move the position of the ellipse. So I can just move, oops. So I would go to the contents and go to the ellipse and go to the ellipse transform. And so the position of the ellipse, I can move this over. And now it's rotating around the middle, but the anchor point is still in the middle. Okay, so now this anchor point is the actual ellipse's anchor point, which we can also move, but we don't want to get too confusing with that, so we're going to leave that alone. The anchor point that we're rotating around is the main anchor point of the layer. So if I click on the layer, you see that main anchor point, and I can move that. If I click on the ellipse, then you see the ellipse's anchor point, which is a separate thing, but we're not animating the ellipse, we're animating the layer. Okay, so the anchor point can be kind of confusing, and you can also animate the position of the anchor point. So if I open this transform and keyframe the anchor point, and then move over here, and I move the anchor point over here, I don't know why it didn't keep my original keyframe. Okay. Okay, there you go. So now see the anchor point is moving. And so the rotation of the ellipse is moving around that anchor point. I don't know why it's not showing us the anchor point moving. Let's see. Yeah, it shows the anchor point just staying in one place, which is kind of weird. But we can see the animation happening. Anyway, let's zoom out. So we don't necessarily need to do something that complicated, so I'm going to undo this and just leave this as is. But that's what you would need to do if you want to have your shape rotate around the edge versus if I reset the position of the shape, then it's going to rotate around the middle. Okay, so it is kind of confusing, but hopefully that made sense. Let's move this guy out again. Although I want to match, I'm annoyed that I can't see the anchor point at the same time. Okay,
Did you
now.
match the anchor point and the position number in order to?
What's up?
When you did that whole thing last time, did you match the anchor point and the position number, or?
Like the, what do you mean? Like just copy and paste?
Yeah. Did you use?
Yeah, I could set the anchor to 0, 0, and then set this guy to 0, 0, and then just move it over. Okay, there we go. That looks okay.
And then basically you just put the anchor point at the same number as the position number.
But then it'll be centered again.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah, no, what I'm trying to get is that it's rotating around the corner.
Oh.
Yeah. Okay, so let's throw this into our main composition now. So if I throw my anchor point in here, oh, now I can drag. I don't know what is, for some reason the other day I couldn't drag these guys. Now I can drag. So you can actually drag these layers up and down, I guess. Okay, so now we have this guy animating like that. And let's say, okay, so I want to bring it in a little bit later. So I'm going to move over here. So I'm going to bring this guy up here. And I want to, let's go back to my regular select tool. I want to move him like over here. And let's keyframe the position there. So I just hit P to get position, and I just hit the clock. And then I'm going to move this over a bit and go over here. And now that will come on the screen. Although we lost the rotation. Oh, because I shouldn't have, that's actually a good thing to go over. I shouldn't have changed this side, I shouldn't have changed the beginning of this and this layer. I should have just moved it over here. That's why I lost the beginning of that rotation. Okay, so let's see that again. Okay, so now it's rotating. So let's go to 6 seconds and move this guy down here. And then go to the beginning and, oh, whoops, keyframe the position. Oops, okay, let's move that keyframe over here. And let's move this guy off screen. Okay, so now we get the two animations together. I'm going to move this in a little bit. Okay, let's increase this a bit. Okay. So this looks pretty goofy, but I just want to go over the basics of that. And let's add a couple more frames in here. So that's the other thing I want to look at is adding some keyframes and editing visually instead of using the inputs here. So once you add in some keyframes, you can see it creates this like little line, and there's also some handles here, and this doesn't change the timing, but it changes the motion. So I can actually create a Bezier curve for this motion. And I can also add keyframes really easily just by changing the position here. So I can make this guy go up and then come back down. And then I can just drag these guys around. I can change the handles. So it's actually pretty easy to animate visually. Maybe I want to move this keyframe to the end and make him go over here first. It kind of got weird at the end. Let's move this handle over here. Okay, so now the rotation is ending before we arrive. So let's move these guys all back a little bit. So we can move these keyframes around. I can move this guy up here, maybe swing this around like this. Maybe it starts in here. And so I can visually edit stuff just as much as I can, play with the actual parameters down here. And so that might be a useful way to add, to the complexity of your animation. I could also drag this guy back over here. We could do some crazy stuff like make him come down here. Every time we move the shape, it's going to add in a keyframe at the point where we move it. And so let's adjust the timing a little bit here. Okay, so that looks pretty goofy, but you get the idea of how we can do some more editing just visually, just dragging these points around. All right. I think that's good. We're gonna go over a couple more things on Thursday, but I think that's good for today.